Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is Monday, April 17th. So I had a heck of a time today trying to even get into Yu-Gi-Oh! Either there was something wrong with my install, which probably wasn't the case, or the servers were just straight up down for the 10-20 minutes I was trying to get into the app. And so in that whole process of just trying it, immediately I thought, oh, this is me changing the network settings, and this is all my fault. But weirdly, it seemed like it wasn't, because it was only Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel that was having trouble, not the rest of my internet on the same computer. Looks like we've got yet another event happening now that it's halfway through the month, so that's going to take up all of our focus, I imagine. So yeah, it's already starting off on a weird foot, as far as just, I thought for a brief second there I was going to have to just try and stream without any Yu-Gi-Oh! At all, which would be an interesting way to force me to just find some different background music and potentially experiment on not playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At all. There still is a lot of people still that come into the chat that are interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! And just not really interested in the video game news aspects, whereas my interest in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is pretty low. As somebody who's been playing like collectible card games every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for at least 6 or 7 years, probably closer to 8 or 9. It's been a long, kind of exhausted journey at this point. So yeah, being interested in any collectible card game can't be that high. It really just can't. So they're going to give us this attribute thing where arguably I really should just focus on playing ranked and get up to platinum. It doesn't matter really if I ended last month at gold 3 and then in this month at gold 2. There's no big difference there. It still is going to knock me down back to like silver 5. Alright. So this attribute 4 concept, I assume it's got some kind of limitation. Only monsters that are earth, water, fire, or wind attributes may be used. That is at least something different. And you're earning medals, which I assume you're not losing medals ever to get rewards. And yeah, it looks about the same arrangement as far as rewards. So if I was to select a deck, and we were to just say Zodiac Tri-Brigade, is there any problem here? As far as what we couldn't play, we couldn't have, let's see. And then edit. So if we were going to try to make a modified Zodiac Tri-Brigade, I gotta disable that. I've been playing with the Google Assistants because of the setup for my car dash radio head, and apparently I left it on my phone while I was playing with that. Inherently, though, let's see, there's way too many things, like way too many options under Google Assistant and there's something wrong with it. Like, Google Assistant kind of is an app that's built into Google search on Android at this point. It's not really used. Let's see, I guess you just try and add another one of those if you had one extra of those. Or we could just add an extra one of these there, and that will get you close enough. That being said, you can't have Zeus, which that eliminates that idea. And can't have that, and you can't have that. So yeah, there's, I guess, your event deck there, which loses a significant amount of its value, certainly, but it's a familiar deck. Or you play as a loner deck, which probably makes a lot more sense. If anything, this animal deck implies to me that this was supposed to be an Easter event and they're just late to the party as far as Easter goes. And Earth, Wind, and Fire and Air as 4 elementals is a very Asian idea, certainly. Or, I mean, it's an Asian idea in the sense that it's still an idea that's kind of thought of and used in storytelling in Asian stories more often than in Western stories, but in fairness, Earth, Wind, and Fire definitely were alchemical concepts, so they basically were things that that came out of the Middle East, Egyptian times, things like that. I guess we can't play. Alright, well, this starts in a couple days, so I guess I have a couple days to potentially try and get up to silver just playing. Alright, that makes it a little bit easier. Inherently, for the accountability section, I don't want to go too long in this, but it has been a nightmare in just the amount of time it's taken to set up this radio, and I'm still not 100% sure I'm actually improving anything, and that's really where this could really fall apart. The plastic mounting brackets I got were wrong. Like, the depth of the screen of this radio is probably about half as thick as what an old radio screen would be. So where the screw holes on the side were to then make a right angle to screw holes on the mounting faceplate of the car would have had the screen and its control volume knob embedded very deep into the panel hole of where the radio was, and then you just would not easily be able to grab the knob, and it just wouldn't look good. It would be not flush with the rest of the panel, and yeah, overall the whole thing is just kind of everything is OEM on my car, and I imagine that's still the case even with brand new cars, and it just makes this continued argument that you should never try to install aftermarket radios, and this almost certainly is why aftermarket car radios are so expensive even now, is that everybody's screwing everybody on it. Nothing is compatible, nothing is standard. Unlike, say, a USB charging cable, where there's a high level of standards there that even though you can make cheap Chinese cables that aren't quite within spec, they still kind of work, and it lowers the price of everything, and it makes a lot more competition. It is one of the rare examples, frankly, when you look at like USB charging cables and things like that, the even cell phones at a certain level, that there's actual competition there that actually led to innovation on some level, and reduction in price, and just one factory making 5 different cables and then rebadging and rebranding them as 5 different things, so it looks like, so it's different companies selling things that are made from the same factory and competing against each other even at that level. And there's just none of that in car radios, or cars in general, as far as how they're built, whether it's an older car and a newer car. I had to literally just brute force the Maestro RR I just started going through everything, every single brand of car radios that the Maestro RR claimed to be compatible with, which in fairness, no, it's not in a fairness, but in actuality, the list in the app of radios it lists is highly full of radios that it is not compatible with, but they are brands that Maestro RR has some kind of advertising or partnership deal with, or at least they've dealt with them enough that they're listing them. There's actually very few radios that were popping up that actually would connect to the iDataLink Maestro RR data cable, which those are the only ones that they claim are actually compatible. Everything else is a non-compatible driver firmware that has some kind of programming in it, because it's different depending on which brand you choose, but it's still claimed to be non-compatible. So what I found I had to do is click on like the first radio brand, and then search for the word other, because that tended to be it. And there was always these listings, or almost always these listings, of a radio, quote unquote, that was said other radios with Bluetooth, without Bluetooth. The with Bluetooth, I think, specifically just means, does the car have a Bluetooth phone button or not? Because obviously it wouldn't have a phone button if there wasn't any Bluetooth in it. I don't think it actually inherently has anything to do with whether or not the phone Bluetooth functions that would have been in your OEM car setup are going to be maintained or not. And so I had to go through the first radio brand and try other, and see if I could get enough steering wheel control signals, and they really should be just labeled as signals, that could be then recognized as a pulse width modulated up and down binary signal that could be detected by this Q96 Android radio that arguably is maybe a little too cheap for its own good, and may in the long run somewhat struggle because it's Android 10 instead of Android 11, although really there shouldn't be that much of a difference between an Android 10 and an Android 11 operating system setup, as much as there's what should be a difference between whether or not it has like 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi hotspots, which it doesn't seem like it does. And that was something that I didn't even know to look for. So the wireless Android setup there is going to be kind of slow, always. It may not be that big of a deal, but just having Android 11 also potentially means it's going to get capped out on certain levels of the apps. But ideally, and this is something that's going to be weird about any Android operating system running a car dash, is you kind of just want all of those apps locked and working. You don't want to get updates, which is just like the opposite of what you normally would want in pretty much any other case. Like, you would want constant updates for security reasons or for feature reasons, but in a car dashboard, radio, you really just want it to work and work offline and always be offline, which inherently means I need to use probably a different navigation app in its own operating system. There's this weird split between the Android operating system that is built into the car that's going to be somewhat limited and designed hopefully to be offline, but you can still install apps on Android, which is something you absolutely could not have done in any like OEM radio of the past. But then there is also going to be Android Auto that just brings in apps from your cell phone and looks completely different. And generally speaking, 99% of the time you're going to have the car just immediately go into Android Auto mode and use Google Maps and use the data from your cell phone, which, yeah, there's definitely an argument to spend a little bit more, get an Android 11 or even Android 12 if it's available operating system, get something with a faster processor, faster RAM. I haven't really run into lagginess. I definitely heard people complain about this. And anything, as you try to get better and better, the prices are just going to go up and up. Like, it's very reasonable in my mind to spend $200 on a radio. Although, in fairness, I still had to use the Maestro RR. Even though I've been told it won't work, I brute forced it and did make it work. At least well enough. I would have really struggled if I tried to have it do something by holding down the buttons, but in all fairness, the buttons on the back of a steering wheel or on the front of a steering wheel, having hold down options on that's not really something that I would want anyways. But yeah, there are 8 buttons, and I was really struggling to find 8 signals that I could level up to connect to 8 buttons. And it doesn't even matter what the signals are labeled as in the Maestro RR. It just has to be recognizable as a signal that is separate and different from all the other signals that it's getting. And I was consistently having problems where under certain car radio brands I'd get no signal, or I'd get one signal at most it being recognized, or I would get signals that were not different. So I'd press one button and then it would say, oh, you pressed this other button. But yeah, I eventually brute forced it, so steering wheel controls seems like they're going to be maintained. Now I need to get the Google Voice Assistant working, otherwise the whole point of this may fall apart, and the Google Voice Assistant needs to work offline, so I can say take me to like 123 5th Avenue, just to pick a random address, and it would be able to figure that out and do that completely offline, which honestly, Voice Assistant in Google Search, whatever, the Voice Assistant built into Google Search just doesn't want to really do that. It says, sorry, can't connect to the internet. And then on my phone, irritatingly, as a separate thing, Google Assistant, when I hold down the home button, does not work. But if I launch the Google Search app, which is the same app, it does work. Like, I'll ask it what's 1 plus 1. In the full screen app, it'll say 1 plus 1 is 2, obviously. So, real easy solution there, makes sense. I'll ask it what's 1 plus 1 by holding down the home button. It says, sorry, I didn't understand. And I've straight up just had to, I don't know why I'm particularly playing more here. I guess I may have some daily quests that would arguably make sense to do. So yeah, I've just had to submit a complaint, basically a feedback to Google and say what the heck is going on here. This should be the exact same code. There's no reason why it wouldn't be able to understand one way. And I suspect it, very possibly it is because there's some setting I changed, but there's like so many settings. It's just unreasonable that even somebody who's technically minded like me would be able to figure it out, what one setting is wrong. But yeah, I definitely have moved more into the realm of software issues with incredibly slow, having to like repeat my Wi-Fi, which don't use Wi-Fi repeaters if my experience is anything to compare to it, because it is incredibly slow. Like I can connect to my Wi-Fi, my phone can connect to my Wi-Fi outside my house and then repeat it to the radio, but the radio just doesn't have an antenna for Wi-Fi. Apparently it's not using, it seems like, the GPS connector or the antenna connector, although maybe it will, and I just haven't been able to mount the whole thing in the radio hole and connect those connections. It would be nice if it used those to increase that, but yeah, there's definitely an incredible slowness just trying to install apps and set things up. And I imagine it may just be a really slow Wi-Fi chip in the thing too. This really is just an Android tablet that has been repurposed to be a car dash, a very small screen Android tablet, which gets to an interesting point in that there is a camera hole there. There's no camera app. So I am going to just install a camera app and see if you can literally use the camera app. Odds are kind of low, I'd say, for that to work. Not 100% low, but yeah. Let's see. Because I suspect either the camera app will just not work, or that they have not wired the camera app in. Of course, there is also a possibility that there is some like secret camera app in it, and overall there is going to be some kind of spying going on. I don't imagine you could really even successfully spy on people though. Like, when you really get down to it, like the fact that so many of these units would just not be connected to the internet, or they'd be connected to incredibly slow internet. The idea of even taking a picture and sending a picture to some Chinese server just doesn't make a lot of sense. If anything, it would make a lot more sense to put an update into the software that just changed the GPS around and confused people, or shut down the whole unit completely and confuse people. I mean, that gets really into like paranoid thoughts of, if China was to invade the United States, just a full-on land war invasion, and then they could turn off an incredibly small percentage of cars' GPSs. That's not going to really affect that much. There's no military tech that's going to have an Android GPS installed in it. Hopefully not, at least. If it is, it's going to be some U.S. contractor that subcontracted illegally into doing that, or almost certainly. that wouldn't be allowed as far as procurement. So yeah, I mean, yeah, in theory, it could be listening to me and sending audio files up and trying to hear things. It's a manpower issue, though. Like, how often are you in a car and you're saying something important? You're not going to say your social security number, your phone number, your name, your address. Those kinds of conversations very rarely happen. Even if it was only listening to like phone calls, the odds of that are so low that you would have to spend massive amounts of like speech to text recognition AI type scanning of those files, or massive amounts of people just spying on people. For every one person that you want to spy on, you need at least one person to spy on them, and that's just a waste of manpower. Meanwhile, assuming it's not spying, if the camera app it does actually work there are reasons certainly for like QR code scanning and things like that you would want to have a camera built into it, and cameras in general are just built into tablets in the first place. But I also wouldn't be surprised if there isn't actually a camera, and what I'm seeing is actually more of a light sensor to just determine the brightness, and it's not actually wired in such a way that it can do anything more than just get a brightness signal. Or it might be a camera that's just being used as an auto brightness thing. I've been in the realm of using only Samsung phones for so long too. It's also somewhat surprising just to see how many improvements and tweaks Samsung have done to Android phones versus a more standard, a different Android phone. And some of the Samsung stuff is ridiculous and not necessary, but it does have some optimization. Too. So yeah. The problem now, and I said I didn't want to talk about the radio too long, and I'm already talking about too much, is I spent the whole weekend working on this, mostly just brute forcing the Maestro RR coding. I think I've got that working. I hope I've got that working. If I haven't got it working, then it's literally just the one voice button that's not working, and that would really suck because the voice button is the one thing you really, really want to have work. Because it is absolutely useless if you get in a car and you have to be somewhere in 10 minutes to then have to try and type in an address using a keyboard and mouse, or having map services that have to be online, and then having to set up a Wi-Fi hotspot and then use your cell phone data, which, yeah, I actually don't have unlimited data, so I have, in fact, really cheap, incredibly low amount of data on my cell phone, which is fine because I was always connected to Wi-Fi. I'm going in circles here. Also, Wi-Fi repeaters, don't use them. Buy access points. Run 4 access points to the 4 corners of your house if necessary, and then have those access points power over Etherneted or just Ethernet connected. That is going to serve you way better. Mesh routers, probably better than a Wi-Fi repeater, but still not really the right solution at all. And so very possibly what I'll want to do here is run an access point somewhere where the car, when parked in the parkway, in the driveway, can access my Wi-Fi. But even then, in all honesty, you park a car, then you turn the car off, that turns off the radio. It's not going to get a lot of updates. It would still create a situation if you're just trying to get updates of having to sit with the car on in your driveway, which is what I'm mostly doing. But yeah, I'm stymied looking for another mounting bracket until Friday because I had to order another one. I stupidly tried to mangle and cut up the current mounting bracket and figure out some way to get it to work, even going stupidly as far as trying to glue it on, which just made a mess. The point here is the mounting bracket should look really good looking and polished, and because it's the face and facade of the whole thing. Like, so cutting things up or trying to customize things is highly unlikely to have worked. It would have worked if the radio itself had come with the correct mounting brackets for my car in the first place, but it just didn't. And so it would have just rattled around and loose, and that's not realistic. This thing does need to be screwed down. Another point certainly to be pointed out is that the radio I originally have is this giant metal box that takes up almost the full space in the car dash in the radio hole, and this new one is super flat, and that's almost necessary because the Maestro RR, the extra cabling and harnessing, all the extra junk as far as wiring that's being added is going to take up space. Also cooling too. Noticeably here, I've said nothing about the audio in the DSP. It looks like it's an amazingly good DSP if you really love to fiddle with the audio. As far as the actual audio quality, that's going to be fairly subjective. It probably isn't that good since it's only $200, considering like big brand names are $400 to $1,000 to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a radio. And inherently, since I'm just sticking with the factory amp, like, and the factory speakers, I bet the quality on that is not that good either. I don't really have any care about any of that. Like, it doesn't matter as long as it's not incredibly crackly, incredibly awful sounding to listen to over the air FM AM signals. I just don't care about it at all. Or if for some insane reason it was really poorly sounding when transmitting Bluetooth over. Yeah. But yeah, I'm stymied probably until Friday. And then hopefully by the next Monday I'll be completely done. Meanwhile, I'm just not getting anything done as far as pre-recording footage and playing Lego DC's Supervillains. This is supposed to be a video game channel, and I've just been completely distracted for weeks now. Yeah, and another thing that certainly frustrated me is I'm trying to run USB cords to where the cup holder is, and squeezing the cup holder's retention plastic bracket clips out is basically another nightmare as far as just it's a lot of extra frustration. It's incredibly thin spots that, like, they said use like butter knives or just standard non-sharp flatware knives, but even the knives I'm using are too thick. So, and there's just like these two retention clips. You have to get something incredibly thin. You would need like really a pry tool for a facade pry tool, and the radio I bought came with one, but it is not particularly the best quality one. Right. Potentially gonna lose here. This guy's just doing a whole bunch of effects based on my actions. Here's that Terra Metals deck that the person on the chat in the last stream was talking about. I could see potentially why Terra Metals would be a deck to build. So I probably should spend some extra time trying that. Well, there's literally nothing more I can do. I'm just gonna end the turn. But yeah. Frustrating side projects, and inherently I've done far too many side projects and run up the budget this month way more than I should have. Sort of kind of an emergency situation. I'm still in this minor emergency situation, and it seems like it's just going to go on forever at this point, which, like, 6 months to a year from now, that may just be the new standard as far as this is going to take up a ton of my time, whereas I previously had very consistent free time on Tuesdays and Thursdays to make pre-recorded footage. Now Tuesdays and Thursdays very often are, at least for the foreseeable future, taking up are completely busy. I'm completely busy on those days. See, I'm just about to cross the point of having 600 subscribers, not anywhere close to the watch time to be monetized. Honestly, at this point, I do want to hit the, like, get into the YouTube partner program, but I probably would prefer to just wait until 2024, like, which is waiting way too long anyways. I guess for tax reasons it doesn't really matter, come to think of it. What would be really irritating is if you got into the YouTube partner program like in December and then somehow made enough money that you had to report that on taxes for 2023. But whatever. Alright, well, that was 40 minutes of rambling. And I kind of promise, once I get this car radio working, unless there's something crazy that happens to it, I will never talk about a car radio again. It is nice, certainly, though, that it has an Android operating system. Or even if Apple made a aftermarket radio system and there was just an iOS iDashboard type thing, just having a marketplace where apps could be installed is nice, certainly. A lot of the apps don't look particularly great in widescreen and aren't really designed to look great on it, but they work, they do things. I can put an alarm clock and a calendar and a note-taking app and a calculator, things that are nice to have on any device, certainly, that were not there by default. Camera app, if I get that to work. I can install YouTube Advanced instead of YouTube and ad block without paying for YouTube Premium. Which, as a YouTuber, maybe it's odd to say that, but you know what? Google and YouTube don't really deserve my money at this point, and they don't give me quality content. They may give me a lot of content. if I was going to spend money on entertainment, I'd almost certainly be more interested in buying Blu-rays still at this point. But yeah, being able to potentially update maps, which Garmin GPSs in the old days, and still probably now, charge like annual fees to update maps. Potentially with Android Auto and an internet connection, having traffic updates and construction updates on Google Maps is super useful. There is definitely an assumption with things like Google Assistant that you would just always be online. So a car radio, potentially with its own like SIM slot and cell phone connection, wouldn't be a terrible thought. As a step up. Yeah, if I had infinite money, I definitely would potentially get rid of the radio I have now, get one with a bigger screen that would just totally pop out. Honestly though, getting a bigger screen in the way it's set up in my car would definitely obstruct the view and probably get me pulled over. So yeah, you have to have a bigger screen and then also be able to almost pan and tilt it downward, so it's not blocking the view of the window. So that might be a bad choice. But yeah, one with 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, one with a 3G LTE type, or 4G or 5G. Probably you want to go at least 4G. I would say LTE type connection as an option, and that you would just pay for some kind of extra data plan, which might be a little expensive, but really wouldn't be that expensive if you're already putting in an expensive radio controller. Alright, let's cross our fingers and hope this works. I'm in a weird position here where I think I probably should stop playing as soon as I get to silver for the rest of the month. So at that point, we might open up, and I don't want to make any promises here, we might open up just playing non-ranked play to do the daily quests and really just focusing in on covering the news quicker and saving some time there. I might even get generous and consider playing with fans, but I don't even want to begin to promise that, because then people are going to want that, and it's always kind of a nightmare where everybody thinks that they're the special person that I'll make an exception for and play with fans. It's still a situation where you don't get daily quests done with playing with fans, and so it's just not an efficient use of time. So even saying that out loud is a mistake. But yeah, we have to get to silver first, and then 10 days of potentially focusing on the event and then if there's free time in between getting the silver and the event starting, playing single player. One of the things I did actually work on as I was just kind of relaxing in the night, what inherently happens is once it starts getting dark, it's just too much of a hassle. I'm also wasting a lot of gas leaving the car running so that the battery doesn't die. But yeah, once it gets too dark working on the radio. Looks a little bit shady. I don't want to have somebody call the police on me in the middle of the night thinking I'm stealing a car radio, which back in the day I bet you probably could make a lot of money stealing car radios. Today, with the anti-theft programming in almost all of them, and a lack of people who would really want to install secondary radios anyways, I bet you don't make a lot of money that way. There's yeah, getting the raw material from stealing mufflers and or just hubcaps and things like that probably would be more profitable. And frankly, kids stealing hubcaps and radios, it's just not a safe criminal activities, because there's no safe criminal activity these days, with so many people willing to shoot first and never ask questions, whether those are civilians or police people. Like in the old days, decades previous, kids stealing radios would have been chased by a cop or and maybe catch a beating, punched in the head or something, as they're running away from the cops. Now cops will just tase you or shoot you with a gun, and not even bother to try and run after you. But yeah, as I was resting, I was looking at this and I started down the idea of making a macro to grab all of this. Unfortunately, this pop-up to grab the release date is not something it seems like I can grab, because it seems like it's a more JavaScript based dynamic thing and it's not hidden in the code. It probably is somewhere hidden in the code, and if I could strip it out and spend a lot of time on it, I probably could figure it out. But on the first pass, as I was trying to evaluate how I might create a Excel sheet, a chart bar graph, let's see, should I summon this or should I summon this? Let's summon this. See what we can do here. So I'm not sure any of these abilities can be activated. Yeah, it does seem to be the case. So arguably maybe I should have held off and kept Trident, because here we'll activate this and waste our time. Yeah. See, that was a waste. Alright, so this is going to create a weird situation where this can direct attack. Doesn't actually need to do damage though to summon Zeus. I don't think it does. So then we summon Zeus here. And that gives me a 3,000, 3,000. But it does put me in this weird position where we'll try and activate his ability and it won't work. So until we could potentially destroy this trap card, all I can do is attack with 3,000. So I'm just not going to activate his ability. It's just pointless. We'll save it. We'll hope we get that one spell card, Terrible Twister or Tornado or whatever. So yeah, looking at this and thinking about this, I can make a macro that could grab the name, can grab the number, can grab the nice little small icon image here, and possibly can grab the link, the hyperlink to the actual game. And that could be certainly a decent amount of information for each of the top 100. I'm just picking top 100 out of a hat every time the macro would be run, and put it into a Google Documents Excel sheet form that the responses to that form are then automatically put into a Google Documents Excel sheet. Right, so I'm going to activate this. And then this. And then this. Basically what I'm doing here is trying to eliminate cards from the deck to get a better chance of the getting a better chance of the card destroying item I need. Although it may just not matter, I may just win. So the general idea, and a lot of this, like the macro using UI Vision Selenium to grab things and web scrape, won't be the hard part of the code. This is really just grab the number, grab the icon, grab the name, the URL, and then repeat 100 times. So you're talking 20, maybe 40 lines of code that are actually fairly short lines of code in the Selenium part. The difficultness will be programming the Excel sheet to take that data and consolidate it out and improve upon it. I guess inherently you're going to probably want a number of bar graphs, and I'm hoping that the Google Sheets can do this. You'll want to see a bar graph with a picture on it at its most recent spot and the name on the left, and you'll want to see that bar graph for 100 different games, so potentially 100 different colors, which is maybe too many in total. And so yeah, that's what I would like to see, is just this bar graph to show what people are playing. And inherently, because I can't get the date that it was released, I can't really filter that out, but that may not really matter too much. I might just do that at the end of the year to look at the chart, but having it being automated the whole time would be nicer, certainly. Right, well, I don't know if it's really worth it to go through this whole process, so let's just win. Yeah, I think that'll be it for today. Though, one more win to gold tier 1. Let's just keep playing. While looking at this, there is some interesting other things to potentially consider here. As far as there's another SteamDB chart here that shows the most followers or most wish listed upcoming games, most followed upcoming games. Like, here's most wish listed games, which I don't know if that tells you too much as far as just what actual hype there is around games, but it's interesting information certainly to check out. If anything, though, it is arguably too much information, because most followed versus most wish listed, what does that really mean to most players to follow or to wish list? I know what it means to me. Most played games brings you back to this chart. That being said, under charts there's also a nice calendar function that I don't know if it's actually that useful, but it is certainly an interesting presentation of information. Arguably, though, it's not presenting enough information to be scientifically useful, and I'll show it here in a second once we go through this whole long cycle. I guess if it's my first turn, I'm just going to end the turns on this character, and then next turn we'll turn it into the other character. So, like, upcoming Steam releases here, under most followed, and then hiding less than 100 followers seems like that would severely reduce the number of games that people are actually interested in. In fairness, though, like, that information is not just going to be that useful in general. But then you have this calendar, and it's a very interesting way to present things, to say, hey, on Saturday Crab Champions is coming out here, and then on Sunday the 2nd this Monster Girl 1000 adult game came out. But undoubtedly way more of these games did come out this one day. There's no reason why there would only be one day in which a game comes out, and we're on the 17th and nothing is scheduled on their calendar for the 22nd or the 23rd. Let's cancel this effect. But yeah, as an idea, what you would want to do to improve on this idea, Jedi Survivor is coming out the 27th, is you would want to show multiple games when you hover over it, instead of them basically using either the follow or wish list functions to decide which game is the game of that day. This is effectively not really broadcasting as much as my YouTube Shorts do, but it's effectively doing a similar thing as to my YouTube Shorts, in that it is trying to highlight games that have come out relatively recently. Although they are being more accurate on the date, they are being less accurate on the actual number of games that they're talking about. And they are also running into the problem, certainly, that anything that's an adult game, which I like that there's a blur here. I don't know if that's something SteamDB is doing, or if that's just external links to adult games in black and white blur. Maybe that's something I should add too when I do a blur, is just go into a black and white mode. I could see that certainly blurring things even more. If anything, I guess I would wait until I get some kind of community guideline warning strike. One of the YouTube lawyers, or copyright, Leonard French, I believe his name is, the copyright attorney, on YouTube. Apparently, he put out a video. He hadn't put out a video in a while. Specifically talking about how YouTube chose to defend him, since he's a fairly big YouTuber, against a fairly ridiculous copyright claim. In the sense that, yes, YouTube now is somewhat willing to say, hey, this seems bogus and we're not going to take down the video. I think in particular, since YouTube has set some precedent and won that one case where a 1-second clip of the radio being on in the background did not went their way, they are now, or it wasn't a 1-second clip, it was like a 1-minute clip. But the point there being, once they crossed that line and there was precedent that said 1 minute is not copyright infringement, then they were able to implement some defense against people claiming 1 minute of copyright infringement. And they were able to get lawyers to tell them yes, they can leave those videos up. And hopefully we could push that idea even further in the future to 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes of content, depending on the length of the content overall. That's not particularly fair for people with like paintings and such. Because if you have a painting of Mona Lisa and you put up a 1-second frame still at high resolution of the Mona Lisa, you've still effectively infringed the Mona Lisa. If the Mona Lisa was copyrightable, it would have to be a much newer painting in this example. But inherently, that art really should just lose its value and be more public domain. Quicker and quicker too. So yeah, and I could go certainly on a UBI argument here that if starving artists were just given basic patronage and given basic needs being fulfilled, they would still probably be starving artists that were just fed well enough to continue to make their art. Because every artist I've ever known, which I kind of include myself sometimes in that, probably not so much as being a video game critic all the time, because criticism I don't think really is art. But anytime I've thought of something artistic that I've wanted to do, it's just a natural urge to want to do it, and I would have done it if at all possible, no matter what. I wouldn't have only been motivated by making money from it. Yeah, SteamDB also has, since I've just really have never looked at SteamDB here, a current Steam sales option, which I guess if you were really, really desperate, you could say, hey, give me the games that are 90% off and let me look at those and see which ones of those I want or are on my wish list, because it all integrates with that. And so you could do these micro Steam sales, although there usually are some slightly small benefits of waiting till Steam sale. There are also certainly some games that just never go on sale during Steam sales. Not very many, though, of those would actually go on sale outside of a Steam sale either. The types of games that just never really go on sale tend to be Japanese games in particular that just don't understand the idea of their product ever being reduced, or don't understand the idea of things being on sale during a Steam sale. You can see apparently 26 cents is the new low, even as far as charging a price. Although notably they are not mentioning anything here that's free, which that would also come into play. Let's go ahead and end the turn. Let's see. There is also a Steam calculator where you could enter your Steam ID or profile and see how much your Steam account is worth. I wouldn't be surprised if mine is worth $1,000 to $2,000. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I've actually spent somewhere around $600 or $700 on buying Steam games, even on Steam sales. But I have a decent amount of games for that, so it's not like I'd really regret on that. There's also a list here for patch notes, but I don't know why you'd specifically want to look here for patch notes compared to updates that you could get default in the Steam client. A lot of this really could just be in the Steam client instead of SteamDB, a third-party company, doing it. I wish there was a way to go here and just pull out the information I would like, and maybe there would be some way to search to do that, but it just doesn't feel like there's a large amount of filters here. There are sorting options, certainly, but even the sorting options only tell you the number of people playing, and that is really where I would want to see is just the number of people playing, just to see if gamers are being hyped up about games, not so much whether people actually buy games, because gamers, probably worse than most people, most fandoms, have a problem of pre-ordering or buying games and then not really playing them that much. Alright. Is there anything new been said about the Steam Deck? Nope. Last time Steam Deck even tweeted anything was April 4th, and Twitter has increasingly also irritated people. Here, we may get some quick victories here due to network connection issues, and this may push us into getting the platinum. Do I have time in the next 13 days to get to diamond? No. It's not realistic. Maybe next month if we got a bunch of easy victories. And then certainly that would create also a catch-22 in the sense that if I next month start at gold and work my way up to platinum and I'm trying to get all the way to diamond, is that the time to make a change potentially and make a new deck? Because arguably I should make a new deck. This like Terra Metals deck does look like it might be something big, and there may not be any major changes that happen otherwise for a while that would knock Terra Metals from being a very playable top tier meta deck. Or should I stick with what I have and just continue to try and win instead of trying to relearn a new deck, which I almost certainly would lose more often than I should relearning a new deck. Some stories popped up while I was waiting for Yu-Gi-Oh! To actually connect today. So we have a Video Games Chronicle article that says Nintendo has won the legal battle against the website operator hosting pirated games. D-Storage ordered to pay the Switch maker over $480,000 in compensation. Nintendo obviously won't see any of that money, almost certainly, because the person won't have the money, but Nintendo doesn't care. This is what happened in Paris. So Parisian law, perhaps different as far as copyright than the United States or Japanese copyright law, but it's probably not that different. Let's see. The GameDeveloper.com had an article here. These are just new articles. Media Molecule's co-founder and creative director Mark Healy has departed the studio. This news comes shortly after the studio announced it would be ending support for Dreams. So this almost certainly is a point that we should recognize more often in video game companies, when they have taken that full step to transition away from being the company that they once were and are now transitioning into a very different company that just happens to have the same name. Like, once you lose your leader, that really starts a whole new era where things could be the same, certainly, but they aren't guaranteed to be the same. Go ahead and summon this first. Attack here. Attack here. Probably could have summoned a bigger thing. But yeah, we're already in main phase 2, so we just won't do that. In all fairness, though, like, the co-founder and creative director of Media Molecule leaving may not really be the point at which there was a shift away from their success, because very possibly would have been the idea of getting away from Little Big Planet games and making Dreams instead, which honestly Dreams and Little Big Planet games weren't that different anyways, and inherently I'm not sure that they ever really had any success. I feel like this is really just a second party company, Media Molecule, or maybe a third party company, that was getting massive amounts of funding from Sony to make these kind of kid-friendly games to try to have something to compete against Nintendo, or just have kid-friendly games in general on the PlayStation 5. Might as well activate this, since it's probably going to kill everybody anyways. We also have a Video Games Chronicle article here. American McGee has told his fans to stop asking him about Alice 3 after saying EA doesn't want to make it. The rights are very simple. EA owns Alice and they control it, is the full quote here. I'm not sure if that is a direct quote here. I don't even know why he's bothering to continue to stream or have a tweet responses. I'd really love if people could stop asking questions about Alice in general. So he said on his Patreon, interesting, which he's been using to crowdfund the pre-production of the game before his ultimately unsuccessful pitch to EA. So yeah, I mean, And that's certainly why it kind of seems like a scam, and arguably I would say the concept of Patreon or crowdfunding, something that only would have had even the slightest chance of success, uh, would have needed better investors who could realize and recognize that if it was going to have Alice on the name, EA was going to have to say yes to the pitch, and EA was unlikely to ever say yes to the pitch. And if real investors had invested in the production of some kind of game like this, they would have almost certainly said, hey, let's make this as a generic game that we could take to other publishers. And if EA says yes and we can make it an Alice game, that's fine. If the idea turns into something else, then that would be fine too. But by involving, didn't quite win there that turn, by involving just standard fans, it's no surprise that standard fans are kind of upset that it didn't go through, and that frankly they have a right to be upset that it didn't go through, and then he just immediately gave up on video games in general. I mean, because he also had talk about a Wizard of Oz game, and certainly there were other options, and certainly it highlights how American McGee is just not the person that should be in charge of this project or property. There is, I suppose, a option here where EA does just make another Alice game and doesn't involve American McGee at all, which in fairness, that probably would be the better way to go about doing all of this. But yeah, EA owns Alice and they control it. If you want to do something with the IP, you are free to do that, just like you are with all other IPs, but you get in trouble when you start trying to sell the stuff you create. Additionally, questions on this stuff should be directed to EA. I really want some space from Alice and questions related to this. So why is he even bothering to respond to Patreon? He might as well just do the standard scammer thing of just closing his Patreon down or not responding to questions or leaving his Patreon up. If anything, American McGee's success comes from one, being like crazy, mentally abused as a child. That's where Alice's artistic story and visuals come from. And two, just being in the right place at the right time and working for id Software as a level designer on Doom and Quake games. He really should have never risen to the success of being a creative director of anything. But even at that, he managed to make one game and its sequel, and he was really just pushing it. But he really has just been, since moving to China, just not in with the boys club of video game development, whether people actually disliked him or whether he just was not showing up at E3 enough to rub elbows with the right people. He says, this is his final note on the situation. I just want to reiterate that I understand how difficult it is for many of you. I'm feeling the same pain and anger as many of you, and I understand that in situations like this we often ask ourselves, what can we do, or what could we have done differently in order to change the outcome? It's tough to admit right now, but ultimately we're going to need to accept that this decision and the situation. Let's go ahead and play. Last thing I want to do is disconnect and lose my win streak. Like, him being crazy and just never, I'm not sure, people who are abused as children ever fully recover from that, may also explain kind of this somewhat childish response even at this. Just go bug EA with it, I'm taking my toys and going home, is basically what it feels like he's saying. I think I prematurely summoned the wrong thing. Let's see if we can fix this. Let's see if we grab this one. Then we activate this. Tossing that. It will be very interesting, certainly, if an Alice game gets made and then ideas are lifted or similar ideas are stolen or seem like they're stolen from the proposal and the pitch. Although it would be hard, honestly, for them to even claim that their ideas were stolen when the development of this Alice game was done so publicly. Like, if anything, by them developing it so publicly, they've created a situation where EA is just even in a worse position to make a new Alice game. Had they been secretly making a game, or making a game and just not showing off the weapons designs, the fashion designs, character designs, things like that, then all of that information could have been shown in the pitch under confidentiality agreements, and then, or under a contract. Like, ideally, this is an interesting pattern they've got here. If American McGee was ever going to make an Alice game, he should have been contracting as a contractor with EA this whole time, where EA would have said, we'll pay you a very small amount of money to make this game pitch and make this art, but we're going to own the concepts and the art at the end of the day because you're a contractor, and thus if we pass on the idea of you being involved, you're still going to get paid for the original concept art and credited for that, but we're not going to put ourselves in a situation where you come back and sue us for stealing your idea that you put out publicly and potentially poisoned the well. Which effectively, that is what he's done here, is he has poisoned the wells by satisfying patrons and fans by creating concepts that now are going to be very difficult to avoid copying. Yeah, it's tough to admit, he continues, but ultimately we need to accept this decision, and the situation in general is out of our control. We're not giving up any more than a person who is hit by a bus is giving up. We did everything we could as a team and as a group of fans to convince EA to let the next chapter happen. EA decided to kill the project and the possibility of any future for us. This decision is on them, but we can make a decision on our own, and it's a strong decision to make, to move on, and that is what we have done. We do have in our power. It's often one of the most difficult decisions to make in situations like this, but it's what we must do. So I'd ask you to join me in moving on. If you decide to stay back and continue fighting, that's fine. That's your decision to make. I respect that, and I ask you to also respect my decision to move on. Thank you. If anything, I almost want to take it as like genuine, and it probably is better if he'd move on, but he's not moving on, he's giving up. And there's a big difference there, certainly. Like, moving on would be to make the Oz game. Moving on would to say, hey, you know what? We've learned a lot here, and we're going to take what we've learned, and we're going to make a different game. Alice is not that important as a character. Being in Wonderland is not that important. We've got ideas here, we've got concepts here, we've got a style here. Styles can't be copyrighted. But no, what he wants to do, what he is doing, is giving up and saying, I'm just focusing on my merchandise company and selling merchandise. And he is definitely hoping that the merchandise will continue to sell, and I don't think it will. I think you are getting a lot of fan appreciation around that funding, and once you lose your fans who felt like they were funding or supporting the creation of a new Alice game by buying the merch, I think those fans are going to stop buying the merch. Meanwhile, we're in this terrible situation where fans who thought they actually were funding the development of Alice have now been told it's not going to happen. It had very little chance of ever happening, like, in the first place. EA, if they wanted to make it happen, are now in a worse position where they can't make a game without bringing American McGee's ideas and American McGee's involvement in it. I don't know if American McGee didn't know that from the very beginning. It just seems a little shady. Speaking of seeming a little shady, I'm still trying to believe in the censored gaming creator, but his homelessness situation is just continuing to drag on. But in all fairness, it would drag on. People are donating to us, and I guess they are more trusting sorts than me. I really do hope that the censored gaming person, creator, comes off well. I don't know if he doesn't have like special needs as far as housing or special needs in general. It seems like that, like being in London and living in London, I think is maybe a big problem there, and he probably should just move far, far away from London to much cheaper council housing. I don't understand 100%, but I haven't researched it, why he isn't in some kind of council housing somewhere, or if maybe council housing in the UK is like somehow not safe for him. But it all just kind of highlights where some bigger organization should be in charge of censored gaming and keep him on, pay him a salary, but like when he's coming off on both his main channel and on his private Twitter talking about this whole situation multiple times, it has a begging aspect to it because it is begging, and I hope it's legitimate begging from a legitimate person in need, and that we don't come back 6 months to a year from now and find out that it was all just a scam. I don't know why the urgency would be there if it really was a scam, but who knows. Moving on, though, that's really just a muddy pond I'm trying not to stick my toe into. The National Video Game Museum has announced a brand new scholarship sponsored by Gearbox. Gearbox having its main original office in Frisco, Texas, and the National Video Game Museum being in Frisco, Texas. So Texas residents in Texas, United States, that are high school seniors pursuing a career path in video game design will let you have this internship. Well, they say it's an authentic in-person development experience at Gearbox. They're calling it a scholarship. I'm not 100% sure if it isn't really just more of a internship. It doesn't sound like you're getting a job. It doesn't sound like you're even getting money to go to college. Let's see. Let me click on the link here and see if there's any more details as far as what the scholarship really involves. 4 of the 5, well, let's see. 5 different scholarship opportunities available to high school graduates pursuing a career in gaming-based fields. 4 of the 5 are limited to Texas residents, but the 5th is open to women across the country. All right. Each scholarship has different eligibility requirements. Title I school, I guess those are probably poor schools. Yeah, but there's nothing here really saying what the scholarship is. So, how much of this would be funding towards going to college, or how much of this is just a spend a day at Gearbox, or spend a week at Gearbox, or be a intern effectively at Gearbox? They don't want to call it internships, but I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't just basically a unpaid internship type experience. I need to play here. Shouldn't have activated that. Summon this guy first. We'll go ahead and do this one. And this one. It probably is a decent deal, though. I wouldn't, like, really question getting a scholarship or dealing with Gearbox. Gearbox certainly can put you down at least a certain path of having experience of making games. It's not like there's even a long list of scholarships or a long list of places where you can get scholarships. And at the very least, this is a scholarship from an actual video game company that has had actual levels of success, compared to, say, getting a scholarship that would have taken you to, say, something like a DeVry University or something that would not 100% be directly connected with the industry. Let's see. Twitter ended its free API, which means things like shift codes on Twitter. There was a shift codes account that just collected shift codes for Gearbox, or ShiftBot here, is not willing to pay to run these bots. They were using a third-party bot service. So, like, they want $100 a month per every 2 applications, which it's just not worth it. So, shift codes as a Twitter and similar Twitter setups that would collect or have some kind of API usage in it are seemingly dead unless they're willing to pay. Now, that does mean you could just follow Randy Pitchford or Gearbox or Borderlands to get basically the same shift codes, but it does highlight a bigger issue that there's, I think, increasing there's going to be decreasingly interest in sticking with Twitter in general, and I almost certainly would assume, I need to play over here, that yeah, I'd almost certainly assume that we're gonna see something with the shift codes get away from that. And honestly, we could just get back to the old way of doing things, in which you'd give an email to Gearbox and then they would email you golden keys that you'd put the codes in. Honestly, doing the whole code thing though isn't even that necessary. They could just straight up have in-game events instead of the shift code interactions. I think with Facebook being a long dead medium, like nobody is trying to really use Facebook to advertise to gamers, and Twitter now being kind of dead, the idea of putting out codes on like community posts on Facebook or TikTok or Discord would really be the direct connection, or Mastodon if people actually got on the Mastodon, which I don't think people really are going to. I think just the public facing interactions of things like Twitter may just be dead, and we may just go back to either in-game events, which for the Gearbox stuff, honestly that really should just be the case, is that you log in on a specific day, you get free gold keys, and that is just going to be how it goes. And inherently that would stop me from getting keys for like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which I don't own, but I'm still collecting. Or they could email ship codes. The shift system in particular that Gearbox made was nice to drive engagement, certainly, but it's probably time to kind of just let it go. And social media in general may have been nice for a brief moment there in its early application, but I'm not sure it really benefits too many people. Like, when I look at Twitter and what I'm using it for is I'm just using it for news sources that actually I don't even need the extra news sources, so then I'm just following artists and creators, and a lot of cosplayers, things like that. Increasingly it's more and more just nude or semi-nude cosplayers on Twitter that I'm following, and getting very little video game news or use out of it. I wouldn't probably be checking Twitter at all at this point if I wasn't doing it for these live streams. Like, I don't turn to Twitter on a daily basis because I'm interested. If anything, I'm still kind of following just Reddit posts and things like that, and Reddit's not much better either, but I'm just continuing to play here. I probably should make this our last game, just for time management's sake. But yeah. I, at the moment, don't know anybody in high school, senior high school, that I would particularly recommend the scholarship to, but it definitely is a possibility that some of my nieces and nephews and family members, when they get older, might take advantage of a scholarship like that. So I hope there's more scholarships there. Although I don't inherently encourage people to get into the video game industry. Like, it is much more important, frankly, that the video game industry cleans up its act and acts more professional than it obviously seems like it does, as far as just treating people right, whether that's harassment for one reason or another, and pays people better. But yeah, right now, going into the video game industry is very much just asking for trouble when being a generic programmer. If you want to be a programmer or a generic even digital artist, you probably could do better in other fields than video games. Don't make your hobby your job unless you want to learn to hate your hobby is a very good advice. Alright, so I had some weirdness happen, so we're gonna end up going through maybe some duplicate articles later, but right now, as far as Video Game Chronicle articles, let's see, these are probably somewhat old ones. X-Defiant, closed beta, leaked Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, revealing new footage. Sega is reportedly going to buy the Angry Birds studio Rovio for $1 billion. Sega potentially could do something with Rovio, I'm sure, but I'm not sure they can really do that much because there honestly isn't that much success around Angry Birds now. They ran it into the ground, and they should be applauded for taking the Angry Birds concept. It really should have only succeeded with 1 or 2 games and instead made multiple games and got people to make movies on it. And they took that fad and ran it into the ground in the best way you could do it. So they profited in it as much. But now Rovio has basically nothing behind its name that's popular at the moment, so which might be very good for the likes of Sega, who also only owns Sonic games that are somewhat popular and mostly ran Sonic into the ground back when Sonic was very popular. So Sega may be the experts when it comes to actively knowing how to try and revive or maintain profit on a franchise that is long past its prime. So I think he's going to put this here and then try and summon something else. Nope. He does something different. Interesting. Do we have enough cards in our graveyard? I think we probably do, but might be smarter to do this instead. So we're just gonna summon this one. I feel like Rovio was owned by Meta, Facebook, but I don't know if that really is the case or not. We'll look into that article, I guess, more if it actually happens, and I guess that's probably the best way to manage your time there. A U.S. senator has asked Sony's CEO to reveal PlayStation games exclusivity deals. Kevin Kramer is the latest senator to accuse Sony of anti-competitive behavior. Which, yeah. Not very many senators talking about the Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger in a more negative light. Now, is this a case that Microsoft has somehow legally found a way to bribe senators? Very possibly. Is this perhaps senators just being protectionist and trying to get some cheap votes by seeming like they could maybe protect some jobs or make some more jobs for Microsoft and U.S. citizens? Possibly. Does any of it really matter? Probably not. In the end, it's just going to come down to whatever the FTC says, and I doubt Congress is going to pass any kind of law or anything that would actively target Sony, and arguably they would probably try and target multiple companies, foreign companies in general. I don't know if it really even benefits in the whole current world situation for US to potentially antagonize Japan, when Japan would potentially be a key staging ground if China invaded Taiwan, which there's these annual drills, and every time they happen it seems like China is getting closer and closer to invading Taiwan. Or if the United States had to go to war with Russia. Yeah. Last thing you would want to do is flip Japan and like have all of the military bases pull out of Japan, and then your closest staging ground would be probably Hawaii, which is on the other side of the planet effectively compared to Japan. Like, or Ukraine, which is very far away too. So very possibly geopolitical warfare reasons would put a very quick end to the idea of stopping Sony PlayStation from having exclusivity deals on video games, which is very low priority, I'm sure, compared to that. I did see that Resident Evil 5, the original Resident Evil 4, not 5, I think it was Resident Evil 4, had been updated. Maybe yeah, it has to be 4. 4 would be the only one installed on my computer. A couple days ago on Steam. I would think that that would hopefully just be a small update and no change. That being said, here we have an article that says ray tracing has reportedly been removed from Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes on Steam. HDR functionality is also not functioning as intended in some cases. Which, yeah, if true, which Video Games Chronicles is assuming that it is here, and enough to report on it, that seems very shady, but that also seems very much in line with what Capcom is doing too. We all may be super fans of Resident Evil 4 and the Resident Evil 4 remake, and seems to be great, but it seems like they're using that positivity to potentially make the other games worse. I wouldn't be surprised if this is an attempt at performance improvement. It might be just an accidental thing in which they were trying to get it to work on the Steam Deck better, and somehow they've turned it off for all PC gaming instead of making a specific profile. It could have just been an accident. There really is no good reason why you would turn off ray tracing if as an option, even if it was just by default being turned off. But then you could turn it back on, would be more than fine. Like, there's nothing special about leaving games as they are. It's not like you have to continuously put out updates for every new video card driver or anything like that. Fusion summon, link summon, or pendulum summon, and then activate a trop card. And arguably I should just play some solo mode too. And then that pushes us further ahead on the dual pass too. So we're at 30 and we have 70 days effectively, 69 days. And so yeah, probably by next week we'll be up to this point at the 50 point, and then 2 or 3 weeks and we'll probably be at the 100 point and probably have somewhere around 40 days of the Duel Pass not being really that necessary. Which, if anything, I guess that highlights how the Duel Pass is designed for even fewer gameplay hours than I spend, and I try not to spend that much time here, whereas the ranked play is designed for way more gameplay hours, or just way more success in general. I suppose you could get it done quicker if you were just a better player. Alright, let's go ahead and turn on the blur. Then, let's see if this works. There you go. So yeah, it would be interesting, certainly on the blur, if I took out the color here and made it black and white. But I don't know if that wouldn't make it too blurry, and frankly I think it's blurry enough. Right, focusing on just video game news at this point. Fortnite is reportedly getting a Doctor Who event. At this point, I don't feel like Doctor Who is super popular, but I think they are trying to bring it back. We already talked about this article. Sega has confirmed it has agreed to acquire Rovio for £706 million. Angry Birds developer has accepted the friendly takeover offer. Friendly takeover, I guess, is subjective. Guess maybe Rovio has been an independent company. Yeah. Certainly there is a case there. If Rovio somehow proved themselves to be a competent mobile game developer, they could take the Sega licenses and do a lot more with it than they could do with the Angry Birds games. But if we just see an Angry Birds game where you're flinging Sonic and Tails through the air, that would be kind of ridiculous too. We probably will see some kind of crossover event like that, but that really shouldn't be the main game they make, or even the first game they make. Obsidian's Josh Sawyer shares more info on the studio's scrapped Aliens RPG. Sawyer was in charge of the project from 2006 to 2009. This is really, in a long ways, though, just old information that doesn't really matter. Like, why do you want more information about a game that never got made? That might be historically informative if you're a historian, or if you're a game developer to learn what not to do. But there's millions of things that you're not supposed to do when developing a game or doing any project. There's only a few things that you are supposed to do, and those are the more important things to learn. But I guess you can check out this article if you're interested. The Super Mario Bros. Movie is now expected to hit $1 billion as it continues to beat global estimates. We already talked about Media Molecules. Man, I'm not pronouncing all these words very well today. Mark Healy leaving the studio. Yep. Arguably, if this is supposed to be the co-founder and Dream's creative director, I have to say there is something about professionalism in your look. As much as I would love to see men in the West normalized to have different kinds of hairstyles, the long hair hippie look does not scream professional, particularly when it's wavy and just all out there, and you are sporting a salt and pepper, nicely cut beard with goatee and mustache look. But this does not scream professional. Also, you can see receding hairline, so the long hair is not even doing a great job of hiding that. It's basically all on the top of his head. But even that, the yellow shirt, even if you were just going to tie back the hair and look professional, because even if this was a female, and who knows, maybe he is trans trans I want to say transferring, transitioning, um, or intersex or some other LGBT type definition. But even if you were just a presenting female, professionally speaking, your hair being loose and wavy is almost never really acceptable. It kind of needs to be behind the shoulders, tied back one way or the other. Um, Long hair certainly gets in the way of a lot of things. Definitely, if you're in food prep, you have to have the hair tied back so you're not dropping hairs into people's food. But yeah, the yellow shirt, a yellow like t-shirt, screams unprofessional. I don't know if that is really just a case of video game chronicles.com finding a really weird picture of him or them putting out a really weird picture of him. If anything, it seems like you probably need to scrub the internet of photos of yourself in favor of more professional photos, or make in press packets photos of all the people involved that look really professional. And again, this is why I say if you're running a business, you should probably have a professional photo day when, like, once a year for all employees, to have them dress up and take nice professional pictures of them. And just for like security badge reasons, you should always have people on their first day dress up nice, or on even the job interview, dress up nice and have photos taken of them, and give the copies of those photos to the people and say, here's a copy of this for your own personal use. And make it a very nice thing, when in reality, yes, you also are keeping those photos for use of your security system in case the person is banned from the building or you need to report them to the police for some reason. But yeah, you should have more visual records. In general, Easter just happened, and Easter is usually the annual place for a lot of Christians to dress up way nicer than they ever do the rest of the year, dress up their kids way nicer than they ever do than the rest of the year, and then have photos taken that are put out. Arguably, though, they often dress up in Easter clothes when that's still maybe too festive for year-round photo usage. Moving on, Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection has a disclaimer about insensitive cultural depictions. The second game in particular contains racist stereotypes which have been kept in the re-release. I guess that is a blow against censorship, and being informed is not really censorship so much, or even changing the artist intent. If they put out Song of the South and said, hey, this has insensitive, what was the phrase they used, cultural depictions, that would be fine to put as a warning at the beginning. Disney did do that with a lot of their old cartoons at one time. I wish I knew specifically what the reference is here. Mega Man Battle Network 2 is the main source of the problematic content. At one point, players encounter Black Man who says, I pray every morning to my God and the chicken he provides, which I don't know if that's that racist, really. To say people like chicken, whether they're black or white, just everybody likes chicken. Later, players have a rap battle with a character called Whiskey who says, you just outed the crib, kid. Go suck your mama's milk. Again, I'm not sure if that's racist. I mean, that sounds very much like a thing that would be said in a rap battle. If anything, this feels like an unnecessary addition, but this is the point we've gotten to where Japanese people keep getting localizers and translators whispering in their ears that they're racist or they're being insensitive and that they have to censor everything. And at the very least, here in this case, they haven't actually censored, they've just added a ridiculous, unnecessary thing. If anything, I see this at the beginning. Adding this really just creates this precedent that we'll start seeing this in almost every game, or re-release of an old game, and seeing this warning makes me assume that there's a lot more. I was thinking we'd see a black character that was had like a big afro and big lips and things like that. Something that was really just really offensive visually. But this is nothing really. That being said, it is also a kids game, so they're trying to be cautious, I guess. Let's see. The Halo franchise director Frank O'Connor appears to have left Microsoft. His exit would be the latest in a series of senior Halo departures. That game Redfall is out too, and DF Retro was not impressed by it, from what I could hear. I wasn't paying enough attention to their podcast, which I guess that is one podcast I'm still listening to, and not one I'm actively trying to stop listening to either, because they're not terrible like Giant Bomb became. Yeah, it seems like Microsoft is very much struggling to get games out at specific times, and they at this point don't seem to care if the quality is great or not. They just want the numbers. Inherently, it may be a case that Microsoft needs Activision Blizzard a lot more than they think they do, just to build up their launches, just to keep people wanting to potentially buy Xboxes and play Xbox, or buy Game Pass and play Game Pass. Honestly, it's very possible that Xbox is just going to completely fail and we won't even see a new generation console from them in the next round of consoles. It's possible we won't see any new generation of consoles, really. Obviously, we'll see a new Switch, Nintendo console, but I could see PlayStation really not trying for a PlayStation 6 in the next 5 years, and them just being happy to continue to sell PlayStation 5s. We may have tapped out, and we may finally have hit a point where consoles don't need to be replaced every 4 years or every 2 years. And Microsoft probably would stay around because they have the money, but they could very much abandon it in favor of Steam Deck type things, which they are working. I've heard Microsoft is working on a Windows operating system that is more focused around Steam Deck type devices as their next big thing. And so if Microsoft Windows division starts to focus on that, then there may be even less focus on the Xbox console division. But in the short term, they need games out made and games coming out. That being said, the director of Halo Infinite probably should not work on Halo Infinite. I don't know if I inherently would be able to assume that he should be fired or leave Microsoft, and he may very well have left on his own accord, but Halo Infinite's launch, its promises that have been not delivered, has been an incredibly big disaster and boondoggle. So heads probably should have rolled, and it looks like a head did roll. Let's see. Moving on, the Knuckles TV series now has its cast and has started production in London. This is a Paramount Plus series between the second and upcoming third movies. I think this probably should fail. I hope it doesn't succeed to the point where parents are having to buy Paramount Plus to watch a Knuckles TV series just because kids like the Sonic 1 movie and Sonic 2 movie and want to be informed before they watch the Sonic 3 movie. Let's see. Microsoft's Activision Blizzard acquisition has been cleared in another country. South African regulator says the deal is unlikely to result in a substantial lessening of competition. I would be interested to know what company is in South Africa as far as Activision Blizzard, why it even had to be approved. But yeah, I guess there's some kind of game development company in South Africa, and I'd have to really do some research, and I really don't have time for that anytime, and so I'm not going to do it. Again, much like the French or the Europe approving the Activision Blizzard deal, if South Africa had said no to it, they almost certainly would have just spun off whatever company is in South Africa and still gone ahead with the merger. But if enough countries said that and it got down to the point where only the United States companies were being acquired by Microsoft, the deal could fall through that. And definitely if the United States companies fell through, then the deal almost certainly would be off at that point. Although, who knows? There's ways you could transfer the intellectual property rights to, say, South African company, and then have that be acquired and leave a shell company called Activision Blizzard that has no rights to things like Diablo or World of Warcraft or Hearthstone, and it's just this support company that would eventually just shutter itself down because they couldn't use any of its existing licenses. Although, depending on the amount of people still working at that company and how willing and good they are to make a new game, they could potentially make a new game, although they probably wouldn't. It's very black and white. I wouldn't be surprised if, in the mind of Activision Blizzard's CEO, if this merger doesn't go through, that he would just try and ram the entirety of the company down the toilet and shutter it, just out of spite, just out of trying to sell off in pieces to make money and be out of the business. Which inherently I do think the Activision Blizzard CEO very possibly will announce a retirement in the next 5 to 10 years regardless. Moving on, the first 30 minutes of Dead Island 2 have appeared online ahead of the week's release. The screenshot, I'll say, looks good. I don't really see an interest in watching the leaked footage or spoiling myself. Dead Island 2 very possibly could be a fine game. I don't know how, in any way, though, it could be a good enough game to make up for the massive amount of delays. It would be nice if there was some way that you could delay a game for years and years and years and then come out with a great game, and the gaming community would forgive you for taking so long, but I don't think the gaming community is really that forgiving. And inherently, if you were to try and play Dead Island 1, or even the Dead Island 1 remaster, or which wasn't even, I think, quite as good as the first Dead Island 1, and then you play Dead Island 2, it probably is going to be a big gap in just how many zombies you can have on screen, how well it looks, how many frames per second you get. The level design hopefully is better in Dead Island 2. That's to say nothing of the spin-off games that were all awful, like Dead Island Riptide. The Halo veteran Joseph Staten, which I think is a different Halo person, has joined Netflix to make an original AAA game. Staten worked on Microsoft for 18 years, which is a decent amount of time, and he was the recent head of creative on Halo Infinite. So this is a different guy than the other person who's left Microsoft, so I suspect the other guy, very possibly, is also coming to work on this original AAA game. That being said, even if Netflix does make an original AAA game, Netflix at the moment has no way to deliver a AAA game outside of their Netflix app, which are just mobile games. And I don't think we're going to get a multi-platform AAA game released that way. I would kind of like to see Netflix expand. If they're going to stay in the game industry, they should expand to releasing multi-platform console PC games and PC games in particular, console games, if they really are going to get ambitious. That being said, Netflix cannot just shift itself to a video game company fast enough to make up for its failures as a streaming service and its name just being Netflix. That they need to split off this company and give it a different name. Meanwhile, the company called Netflix still needs to improve itself greatly as far as having better quality content and video, and just doing a better job about creating new content and supporting new content instead of just canceling things. Netflix has just become the Fox of TV, where we already have a Fox of TV, Fox notorious in making interesting content and then canceling it very quickly to then just move on and make more interesting content and then canceling that very quickly. I watched the new Thing movie called The Thing, which would be the third movie called The Thing, because there was I think it was Clive Barker's The Thing was actually a remake of a movie called The Thing in the 1950s, which really doesn't have any connection. Whereas this new Thing movie really was the events of this is a slight spoiler, but it's the events of what happened before the beginning of Clive Barker's The Thing. So it's a prequel that they were kind of hiding around like it was supposed to be a remake, and it is just way worse than Clive Barker's The Thing. And it's just a matter of writing drama and suspension and story and characterization. There's too many people that don't speak English in the group, which hurts a lot. They immediately introduce the Thing monster and show it as a threat, where there should have been some paranoia and suspicion that it was just a human potentially killing off people. There's really nothing new it's doing. If anything, it's just doing everything worse. And if anything, it feels like a movie that was trying to be a remake, and then halfway through they said, actually, let's just edit this a little bit and make it a prequel. But yeah, it's not doing anything interesting at all. I would not recommend watching it. Just watch the Clive Barker's The Thing instead. Watch it again. And on that point, and it has nothing to do with video games, but it's worth pointing out that the original, or the Clive Barker's The Thing, the sequel or remake or second movie called The Thing, it's not a sequel or a remake of the first one. Maybe it's a remake of the first one at most. But that movie, I don't believe, is on Netflix, or at least it's not being promoted to be on Netflix, where it would make a lot of sense for you to watch the newer Thing and then be immediately put into a queue to watch the sequel, or the Clive Barker's The Thing. Moving on, our last Video Games Chronicles article today is a Harry Potter competitive multiplayer game called Quidditch Champions has been announced. Limited playtest signups are live now. I don't know if this is going to be like exclusive to consoles or even exclusive to mobile. Increasingly, you see these Harry Potter games where they have these kind of unique art styles. So Harry Potter definitely seems like it's coming more from people reading the books than watching the movies, and they're trying to do, I think, a TV series, if not a movie series. I think it's a TV series. They would redo all the Harry Potter books. This is a more, Hogwarts Legacy is a more realistic looking art style. But then there's also another mobile game that has a very flat 2D comic book or book illustration art style, which I think is probably more in line with the book illustrations. But yeah, PC and unconfirmed console platforms. This probably is not the Harry Potter game that's going to stay around for that long. If anything, it may very well just be an experimentation in putting Quidditch in future games, because you have Warner Brothers in Hogwarts Legacy. I'm not sure that it actually does have Quidditch in it. So you can have one team programming the Quidditch and one team programming all the other stuff that happens in Harry Potter, and then in some future third Warner Brothers game they can put the Quidditch code and the Hogwarts Legacy code together and have a full package experience, because that is Warner Brothers' plan, fairly obviously, is that they're going to try and sell you Harry Potter over and over and over again as their Disney Mickey Mouse type character, which they're also going to try and sell you DC comic characters too, and Warner Brothers may even try to make a few new characters. Noticeably, though, Warner Brothers would own the Animaniacs series, so you would think that there might be an Animaniacs video game with the Hulu reboot of that, and they didn't make anything like that. And I'm sure there's plenty of other Warner Brothers properties that they could try and make games around, and they just haven't put the budget or intention into it. And I doubt AT&T is going to be really generous with budgets as far as new ideas or new characters. There really should be like Scooby-Doo games and things like that more often coming out. We just don't see kids games in general. Harry Potter, if anything, is the last bastion of hope as far as making kid-friendly games from Warner Brothers and a lot of major game developer companies or game publishing companies. Moving on to the Gematsu articles, we don't really have a lot of them. Redfall character trailer for Remy De La Rosa. If you want to check that out. Sega is nearing a deal to acquire Angry Birds. Sega's response in this update says no formal decision has been made. And then it's updated. They have made a decision, I guess. Wuthering Waves closed beta test character teaser trailer en route. This is a PC smartphone game. Guess it's an action RPG. Yeah, you've got some anime girls. Come on. Wow, what is flipping out there? The interface just does not want to let me click forward. So you got some anime characters running around. Just running around really fast. Yeah, I don't know why this does not want to work. Yeah, character teaser trailers and not a lot of gameplay as far as what it is. So it could be a great game, it could be a nothing game from teaser trailers. Moving on, a game called 404 Game Reset launches in April 25th in Japan. It's a mobile game. This is the one with the Sega characters fighting against a Sega corporation trying to take over. This was the weird weird, I think Kojima, or I don't think it was Kojima, it was somebody else. It's told from the perspective of a certain researcher and will introduce players to a world cast in battle elements. Then you have Sega characters here being anthropomorphized as anime waifu characters. Sega games being anthropomorphized. They seem to be going for more of the moe art style than I would have suspected you would see for at this point. So here's a crazy taxi anime girl. But yeah, I would heavily suspect this is not going to come to the West in its current state. Wouldn't be surprised if characters get censored or outfits get censored. Also, in general, I just don't know if this would have as much enough popularity to make sense that it would come to the West. Seems like they're also getting some Bandai Namco characters and Capcom and SNK characters and Taito characters, which does show that they aren't just all Sega people. It's going to be probably some kind of like gacha game if I was to guess. Although I don't know what they're really fighting or how interesting the story really could be. That's one of the things in watching the Netflix series My Uncle from Another World is how obsessed with Sega in particular the uncle is, as somebody who played video games in his room alone his entire childhood and then was missing from Earth for like 13-14 years, so he was obsessed with playing like the Sega and the Sega Genesis, and he was not around the Dreamcast era or the fall of Sega as not being a competitor to Nintendo. So he has this kind of old school perspective and nostalgia that maybe a lot of Japanese people do, that they probably do have some nostalgia for Sega very much. And certainly there's still a lot of Sega arcade games out there, even if some of the Sega arcades have been shut down. I think all of them at this point have been shut down. There is also a lack of interest I saw in a different survey amongst young Japanese to play pachinko. So that probably will lead to an increased interest in playing either mobile games or video games on consoles or even arcade games. But yeah, the idea of sitting around and smoking and playing pachinko, I think, is going to die as the later generations of Japanese people die out. Moving on, Gametsu has this week's Japanese game releases: Buccaneer, Arcana of Paradise, The Tower, Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered Series, and more. Let's see. Akiba's Trip, Undead and Undressed Director's Cut for the PS4 and Switch. Let's see. Actually, quite a long list here. I'm not even going to bother to read it in favor. This Minecraft Legends game has caught my eye because apparently this is a new game where it looks to me like it was pretty much the same as the other Minecraft game. So I'm confused as to, let's see, what the other RPG game was. There is no tag here in Gametsu for Minecraft in particular. This was announced 10 months ago and I just completely ignored it. But there was that other Minecraft game and people didn't really like that. Now it does seem like, in fairness though, that you are more in a kind of third-person perspective tilted look, that this is going to be more of a base building, almost Fortnite type clone of a game, where you're controlling mobs to join your side and things like that, and building up an army to fight against, I think, evil piglins. Yeah. Whereas the other Minecraft game that they came out with was more of a top-down adventure game and was very generic and boring. And yeah, again, Microsoft just needs to have games released, in particular with Minecraft. They need to do something and make games and slap Minecraft on the label. Otherwise, you're just constantly adding updates to Minecraft Vanilla or Bedrock editions, which you can add new features there, and those fans definitely still want those new features, but you're not going to get a lot of extra sales unless you tried to make a Minecraft 2, and I don't know what you could do in a Minecraft 2 that wouldn't piss off people who own Minecraft 1. There is definitely an argument to saying, let's make a Minecraft 2, but you'd have to add a ton of features that you've been secretly working on. Whereas this is just a game with Minecraft skin on it, and easily could have been a non-Minecraft experience. It's very concerning to me, certainly, though, that I've totally missed that 10 months ago, which, in fairness, 10 months ago I probably wasn't paying enough attention, and I have gotten better about paying attention to games coming out. We already talked about Sega acquiring Rovio. We already talked about Media Molecule. Here we have yet another picture of him with the long hair and beard, and at least it's a button-up shirt this time, but a floral print in jeans. Again, doesn't really scream super professional. Also, having a bottle that looks like a small alcohol on your desk is not very professional. Like, I'm not gonna super complain about him playing with an old joystick, a bunch of different controllers, and having a bunch of old retro consoles all around here. These are probably more desktop toys like these than things you would actually use to program. This might be a PlayStation development kit or an Xbox development kit. Otherwise, this is just a weird computer. Noticeably, though, he's got his computer on the floor, which is how you get dust, and he's got what looks like the side of the computer open, which also adds dust. Maybe there's a glass there, but even if there's a glass there, put that table up there. How many of these monitors behind here are his desk or someone else's desk? I'd say probably neither of these are his desk, so he's just got two TVs of misalignment, and they don't seem like they're the same size, and then a TV over here where he's playing games. And he doesn't have his own private office as a studio director, which seems like that is going to be a problem. Anyone who's a manager of anything needs a private office, probably. A, to hide the fact that they're not doing that much work, which you can see with all these toys, and B, to also just allow for private conversations to happen between his subordinates and him. Imagine if this is the desk he works at, and he's firing people or yelling at people, and you're sitting next to him. That just, it's not really acceptable. And arguably, being acquired by Microsoft, Media Molecule wasn't acquired by Microsoft, but companies that are acquired by Microsoft, I would hope, have more standardized rules as far as here's how we're going to do the seating, here's how we're going to have offices set up, here's how people are going to dress and look, and here's whether you can have alcohol on the premises, or whether you should have a minimal number of toys or no toys on your desk. Of course, in comparison, the Double Fine CEO has a whole office that is just full of distractions and toys, and it's way worse than this. So Microsoft is also not doing that. Moving on, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, The Hidden Treasure of Area Zero, teases a mysterious new Pokemon. I guess if you're into Pokemon, that would be exciting news. Duel 2's launch trailer is available if you wanted to check that out. Does seem like this launch trailer is focusing on a different character, and there are these lines here of infection, which makes me wonder if there isn't going to be some kind of infection superpowers that happen, where you can swing axes and maces harder. Yeah. You have to assume that each of the player characters don't immediately get turned into zombies when getting bit, so they have some special immunity. Looking at this trailer, though, we're not seeing a lot of zombies so far. So that could be a concern, certainly, is if you in Dead Island 2 can only have 5 or 6 zombies in a room, although maybe 5 or 6 zombies might be the right balance, because if you're swinging relatively weak swords and axes very often, if there was 100 zombies and you don't have a machine gun to kill them, that would be a problem. Apparently they're fighting clowns at some point. Going in different places. I'm not sure how islandy this island really is going to end up being. In fairness, I suppose if you landed in Australia and Australia just became the Dead Island, you could have a lot of variety in locations then. Yeah, there's definitely zombie abilities coming to the game, and I just don't think that was in the first game, that you had zombie-like improvements. You had, I think, improvements to your skills, but they were human, not zombie things. Yep, there was one beach scene, so there will be at least a little bit of islandy. And in all fairness, Dead Island 1 also didn't spend all of its time in the beach section. Once it got to Act 2 and Act 3, it was basically in a forest and just not really on an island feeling experience at all. Moving on, Mist Rogue, Mist in the Living Dungeons launches in early access on April 24th. I have no idea what this game is. It says it's an action roguelike. It kind of has that floor appears under you concept of Bastion, although in the case of Bastion, the floor just kind of appeared under you when you walked and was never really a puzzle that you had to actually move at a specific time. This feels more randomly generated dungeon crawling with moving floor elements. It's not particularly that interesting looking, because you have this floor tiles and textures looking kind of boring. Cyan's new game, Firmament, launches on May 18th for PC and then later for PS5, PSVR2, and PS4. Not coming to Xbox, apparently. This is defined as a puzzle adventure game from the Mist and Riven creators, although in all fairness, it's from the same company and arguably mostly being programmed by the new people at the company, and very little of it being programmed or made by the original people that founded Cyan, even though they still kind of work there. They're just old, and even when they were making Mist, were not really doing anything. Now, firmament as a phrase, I might be wrong here, and I'm just gonna, without researching it, throw out this. I think the way the world is described in the Bible and the creation of the world is that you're standing on a firmament, and above in the air, what we would have later defined as the heavens, was another firmament. And so I wonder, by using this slightly archaic term, they aren't implying that there will be a solid ground in a whole secondary layer in this world that will be a big reveal. Otherwise, it's just a kind of archaic name, which is fine. There's a lot more variety in these screenshots than what we've seen before. Not a lot of screenshots, though. Yeah. And overall, I think there's a general idea that you're going to have this Power Glove thing and this puzzle cube thing that is going to be your default controller or key to unlock things. Mostly, though, I imagine this is going to be a somewhat empty experience like previous Cyan games. Hopefully it's bigger and more varied in its puzzles than Abduction is, and hopefully it has a little bit more story than even Abduction, but I wouldn't be expecting much more than that. Just slightly bigger, maybe even twice as bigger than Abduction, twice as much story. Noticeably here there's no real mention of Abduction in comparison. Let's see. I really don't even need to put this on the follow list. I'm just gonna make an executive decision and put it on the wish list, but I will make a YouTube short around it. This does look like an environment that has more life to it, unlike the Myst games where a lot of worlds often seemed like they barely had only one or two humans or one small tribe of people in it. See if Abduction is even compared here as far as more like this. Nope. So if we were to check this Myst remake, I guess I don't own. I haven't gotten through all the Myst games. I don't know what Myst Through the Ages is either. This is a bundle. Yeah. Okay, Abduction. Well, either Abduction was published by a different company, or it has been secretly removed from Steam. Let's see. Abduction. Let's see what happened there. Hide ignored games from developer Sign Worlds. There you go. So Abduction, in comparison, was put out in 2016 and is Cyan's most recent game, but it is under Cyan Inc. instead of Cyan Worlds. Abduction ran into a problem, in my opinion, in that it was all one puzzle basically around this railroad track for the most part, and a gimmick that I don't want to spoil that also used the railroad track. There were some side puzzles, but they weren't enough, and there really wasn't that much story. You see like this flat 3D projection here of a full motion video thing here, and that implies that there would be a lot more story than there really was. You can see abduction is mostly positive, but it's in the 78%, 73% categories. It's not massively positive, such as 89% for the Myst remake. And let's see if we can go back a little bit here. Let's see, Myst Through the Ages is 87%, and Myst 25th Anniversary is 85%. Myst Masterpiece is 84%. Ribbon is 87%. Inherently, though, there's also another game that Cyan published that was very poorly received that they didn't make relatively recently. I think it was called Area Man Lives, or maybe that was the second game they published that they didn't make. And them trying to be a publisher is kind of crazy. They need to make games like Myst not set in the Myst universe. Firmament gives them the opportunity to once again do that. Abduction also gave them the opportunity to do that. They probably need to make these games fairly quickly and relatively cheaply so that they can just put one out every 3 or 4 years instead of trying to have any big major success, because inherently Myst is just not the type of game, or Firmament, if it is like Myst, puzzle adventure games in general are just not the type of games that are going to succeed as well as a Call of Duty Modern Warfare game. And that is where the majority of AAA games go, is first-person shooting type experiences, and Cyan is just never going to be able to make something super successful there. So they should know that they're always going to be a niche market and try to sell multiple games, much like hidden object games are a niche market, but big fish games can make a decent amount of money by selling a lot of hidden object games and making them relatively cheap. Moving on, we have about 3 more Gematsu articles. The educational adventure game Dolphin Spirit Ocean Mission has been announced for the PS5, PS4, Xbox Series, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. It's a rarity that you have a game described as an educational game. There was an Echo the Dolphin, a feeling certainly that Echo the Dolphin was supposed to be an educational game, but like Echo the Dolphin is also a crazy game with aliens and such in it. Well, for some reason, me clicking on this link is not popping up an article, so I'm going to leave that. Moving on, CyberConnect 2's Montreal studio is going to close at the end of July. The Canadian studio was first established in 2016. This is a subsidiary of the Japanese developer CyberConnect 2. They basically worked on like Naruto, Boruto games, I believe. I don't know exactly what they worked on in that studio, but yeah. Japanese offices, I bet, will have a bit of a trend in which they shut down offices outside of Japan and try to bring all of the business back into Japan and hire Japanese employees only. I definitely don't feel like Japanese companies are well situated to become international companies. If Square Enix is any example of how poorly managed their companies were. And even Sony basically gave up the ghost as far as PlayStation to the United States. And yeah, I think Canada is probably just not cheap enough to be a new location to move game companies to become a place where a lot of game companies stay compared to the United States, which has just better connections and more land and cheaper labor. Diablo 4 has gone gold. It's due out June 6th. So far, I haven't heard any extra special hype around Diablo 4, but you know, I think it will probably be fine. I think people that played the beta for Diablo 4 know what to expect and will get that. Like, I don't expect anything major, new, or different when it actually releases. I don't think there will be a mad rush to play Diablo 4, particularly not by me, but the people that do play it will enjoy it and they'll probably be fine. Maybe over the longer point, people might have problems with the end game of Diablo 4 and it not having enough content. Content might be a problem. So here we have a is it wrong to repay the debt in a dungeon, which I guess is an adult game. It's tagged with nudity, so let me just check these screenshots and see if they're YouTube family friendly. So, yeah. This looks to me like this is a dungeon crawler that they've thrown in adult content, or at least a promise of adult content. But it really just looks like a mobile game with multiple currencies. It's trying to either be a parody or create name confusion around is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon? But it doesn't have any of those characters, so it's not a licensed product by any means. I'm a little surprised it's even widescreen. $16.19 is really expensive. Japanese full audio it claims. There's no DLC here to turn on the adult content. And says the adult content is just in there, but oddly it's not in the adult content section of YouTube. Should I give this a YouTube short? Am I doing YouTube shorts on adult games? No, I am not, because they just would not work at all anyways. It's the Stigmata of Sacrilege. It looks like it's an RPG maker with some anime nun characters with giant breasts, and that seems to be all it's really selling on. You can see it's already mixed for $8.99, English, Japanese, and Chinese. Let's see, BQM, block quote, Master Maker Remastered, doesn't look like anything. Peace is Your Destiny, doesn't look like anything. Monster Museum, doesn't look good enough. Number 217721. This is probably some SCP type character, but it really just looks like an asset flip walking simulator. Finger Soccer, doesn't look like anything. Wuxian or Wuhanian. Yeah, the animation style. Well, I might have given this animation style a chance if it looked like there was an actual game around it, but honestly it doesn't look like there is much of it other than a side-scrolling shooter with a sword instead of a gun. So a side-scrolling hack and slasher, I guess that's what you'd call it. Let's see, Dominus Solaris, looks like nothing. Angel of Darkness, Angel of Light, looks like nothing. Right, our next adult game is called Dirty Streamer Puzzle. 3D CGI lady with pink hair, or sometimes purple hair. So she's just a cam girl, which I'm a little surprising. I guess there isn't more of that. But I'm not really seeing any puzzle elements at all. It seems like it's just her, which is probably not that interesting, frankly, to have a streamer cam girl. I assume it's just a visual novel, but it says it's a puzzle game, but it's showing me nothing as far as what the actual puzzle game is. It's selling for $1.39. It claims to have English full audio. I suspect it doesn't. And I suspect, looking at the screenshots, that since it says it's a short puzzle game, you should probably take their word for that. I wouldn't be surprised if this is 20 or 30 minutes. Next, we have an adult game called Sex Standing, which is 2 3D CGI ladies in the sex scenes, or at least some of them, and then attached to that looks to be just a asset flip Death Stranding clone. Interesting game to clone, although it does seem like you can use guns more often. There's also a bald guy, which is weird, and even the female lady has just like blonde hair. It just seems like it is an incredibly low effort 3D model attempting to look like the obviously made for a different reason adult scenes. Like there's just no connection in the character model in the game versus what you see in the adult scenes. Yeah, even a adult version of Death Stranding probably doesn't make a lot of sense. Sex Standing is $3.27, claims to support 103 languages, and claims to have full audio in English. I question whether I would really believe a lot of that. Let's see. Next we have a game called Prank of Dice, which doesn't look like anything. Adventure Puss. Looks like it's nothing really, just a platforming game of no real polish. The Zombu Blocks 2 Open Alpha doesn't look like anything. We're gonna burn through these games fairly quickly at this rate. Learn words, use syllables. I'm gonna give this a follow, but I'm not gonna make a YouTube short around it. Just to see if maybe people like it. Although even as an educational game, I don't know if educational games, even if they were good, would get reviews. Quadrarium, match 3 game of some sort. Give it a chance. Mabus 3000. Give it a chance. Maybe being a little bit generous here just because I've seen a lot of bad games. Office Rush. Doesn't look like anything of interest. My Gaming Club. Looks like it's probably an asset flip PC simulator game. PC building simulator type experience. There's a weirdness here, certainly, in that it's very well reviewed. And that's dangerous if you could even get 514 people to positively review your game when it's actually as ugly as this looks in the screenshot. But I guess I'll give it a chance. Battery Samurai doesn't look like anything. Sunrush. Yeah, I'm being particularly cruel today on the games, which probably is fine. The War of Blackstone. It looks like it's probably a tower defense game. Free to play online PvP game, English and Chinese. It's already mixed, so I wouldn't be surprised if the servers are just really bad on this. Overall, though, as a concept, I think I'd say no. Dance Loop. Am I promoting VR games? I'll give that a short. Really shouldn't exclude VR games. Reflex King of the Elements. Maybe this art style would work if there was maybe better heads-up display polish on it. Something that told me things looked better. If anything, maybe the background shouldn't be drawn this way if the characters are drawn that way. or the character should be drawn a different way if the background's going to be drawn this way. It's a very distracting background. Time Survivors Prologue. Guess this is a Vampire Survivors game. Are we highlighting prologues though? I'd say no. Picture Enigmas. Give that a chance. Studio 5. Unique virtual venues. I'll make a YouTube short around that, but I'm not going to put it on the follow list. Traveler's Path. That looks like that might be something. I'm trying to burn through this as quickly as possible. I've often complained about just saying the same thing when I'm going through these games, and apparently at some point I've just picked up the verbal tick of saying just trying to get through this as quickly as possible, which that's not any better than saying like asset flip or dark screenshot syndrome. Pets Hotel. Okay, there might be something to that. Although some of this is just the same responses. You really can't say anything other than there might be something to it. You hope. Should I give this a chance? There's a couple of screenshots here that feel like a game, but there's far too many screenshots here that just don't feel like anything. Yeah, I'll be generous though. The Imposters. Recollection. Give that a chance. So inherently, if I hadn't been able to log into Yu-Gi-Oh! Today at all, I would have started the news a lot quicker, and I would have been probably an hour earlier to getting to this point, which if I'd gotten to looking at the games an hour earlier, I probably would have taken more time looking at the games. This hacking simulator is probably nothing, so I'm not going to give it a short. But yeah, if I don't spend an hour at the beginning of every stream playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I could take each of these games a little bit slower. Do most of these games need to be taken slower? No. They are effectively easy to judge like a book by its cover, and as such there's no reason to spend an extra 5 minutes looking at them. This game is one of the games that's just too much of a visual mess. Too many explosions going on the screen. Too much bright neon. Stealth race here is probably nothing. Although it is an interesting idea, certainly, to have racers doing kind of like a Mario Kart racing experience on skates instead of in cars. I don't know if skating at the moment is, or skating on skates at the moment is particularly popular, but it is also kind of evergreen in the sense that there will always be kids that have some interest in skating on skates or skating on skateboards or scooters, whatever they pick or whatever happens to be super popular. Romance Coaching 101. There's definitely a danger in playing a game that promises or seems to promise that you get better at dating, because they could give you really bad advice. Although in all fairness, even real romance coaches could give you really bad advice. Generally though, I think I'm going to say no to this just because it doesn't look like a game, or it's not visually polished enough even as an experience. Dune Spice Wars. That's a big name, and we can see it's already very popular. And this came out April 26, 2022, so I may very well have jumped from the new games directly to the fall list cleanup because my macro went wrong. So Dune Spice Wars is still in early access, otherwise I would say yes. I'm not sure I'd ever really bother to play a Dune game, but obviously that would be one. Whereas Dune Ryder here is a mix that I can leave the fall list. And then Dumb Treasure doesn't look like it's relevant enough, even though it's a creepy visual things. So I'm gonna say no to that. It's just not relevant enough. And creepy visuals we can get in other games. Dull Grey is a visual novel that probably isn't relevant enough with its visuals to say yes to, so I'm gonna say no. Then Duelist 2, say turn-based tactics game, which I think I would say no to this just because I don't really want to play it. It's a free-to-play game, single player with in-app purchases. Yeah, just not my type of game in that case. The Duck Flight Simulator is a duck hunt game. It's not very that relevant, but I wish it was. So I'm gonna leave it and make an exception. Leave that on the fall list. Duomo is not relevant. A lot of these games definitely can just be dismissed for not being relevant. Fighting game called Duel Souls. Again, not even hitting 30 reviews years after the release. So they just don't matter. That's the relevancy. Drunk Relapse. It's a funny looking game, which I guess I'll give a little bit more time to, but almost certainly it's never going to get enough reviews. Then Drop System Breach. Looks like it's a hacking game, which I'm just going to leave on the fall list since it's still needs some time, or I could use some more time. Drone Simulator. Drones probably not super popular at the moment, but they will pop up like skates every now and then. But again, this game's not relevant. Alright, so then what I think I need to do is come over here to this other window and then we're back to some fall list cleanup, multiple fall list cleanup. So we have Dungeon Color, which I don't know about, so I'm gonna just ignore it. We already looked at Duelist 2, already looked at Duck Flight Simulator, already looked at Duomo. So the macro just ran a couple times over. So we can just close all of these. Alright. Now get us to GameDeveloper.com articles. The Rex Florent Maureen muses on the point of indie development, if you want to read this article from GameDeveloper.com. No, we never did get any follow-up on the accusations against the GDC conference. And you would think either Gamatsu or Video Games Chronicles would follow up on that story. But no. So that story feels like it was either killed or the accusations were completely false. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a bunch of trolls making accusations against GDC. Just for trolling reasons. If the accusations are true, it should be reported on though, and not killed just because GameDeveloper.com or GDC doesn't want it out there. We already talked about Sega wanting to buy Angry Birds developer for $775 million. Meter Molecules, Mark Healy departing, we talked about. Yeah, the anime game developer CyberConnect 2 will close its Montreal studio in July. Its first and only subsidiary studio. Did this studio actually make anything at all, or were they only just a support studio? Yeah. We already talked about the Paramount's Knuckles the Echidna spinoff. And then is Halo veteran Joseph Staten joining Netflix Games as creative director. This is a more masculine presenting haircut, certainly, but it's kind of a scruffier beard, and frankly, he could do with some makeup and just better lighting. A lot of this is just being in shadow. And yeah, a button-up print shirt that's with the collar not particularly well folded. Doesn't look amazing either. Noticeably, can't really do much about it. His ears seem to have no disconnect there. He has no earlobes, which is kind of a rare genetic occurrence where your ears are directly connected from the top to the bottom. But that might just be the angle and the lighting too. But yeah, not a lot to say when we've already covered this article multiple times. Dead Space composer Jason Graves shares lessons from a career in game audio. If you want to read that article from GameDeveloper.com, most of these are just repeated things. And then the report that Frank O'Connor, Halo franchise director, has left Microsoft. And then that leaves us with just some more fall list cleanup, and then we will be done for today. Drifting Maxwell the Cat is mostly negative in the last 30 days at 21% and was only at 70%. So most recently people are unhappy with it, probably because it's being sold as an MMO. I don't even know why this though would have even been on my fall list. Online now, peak today 1, all-time peak 9. Nobody has been online playing this, and that's the irrelevancy of, even if you do have 87 positive reviews, that's not enough to make an MMO work, and that's what people would want. Clearly, a lot of times my standards are too low, and I'm just putting things on the fall list, or just not caring enough to go over the games on the fall list. And we really are at a point where anything from 2021 should just be dismissed. I can't say, well, things got slowed down in the pandemic, because at this point, if this was released June 15th, 2021, people are just not going to ever find this game or play it. So, yeah. I might make some exceptions for something that might be a good kids game like this, which in this case I'm just going to make an exception and put that on the wish list. I may never buy it, it may never matter. Same can probably be said for a DreamWorks game, even if it's not super relevant. Just making special exceptions for kids games with big franchises behind them. And Dreams of Dolly requires a VR headset, but it's free, and that's why it's still on the fall list. Then Dream Time. Probably should say no to this. Dream Team Basketball. It's a collectible card game, basketball game that's still in early access, so I'll give it more time. Then Dream Cycle. Is this an MMO? No. So let's see. It looks polished enough to say yes to, and it is mostly positive at 70%. Arguably, maybe I should say no because it is just 70%. Let's see. Yeah, I think I would say no here. It's just not quite high enough for a game that I'm not that interested in. And maybe that's a mistake, but those kinds of mistakes can be adjusted later if I get desperate for more games, which I just don't foresee for the rest of my life how many more decades or years that may be that I'll have extra time and just have to start scraping the bottom of the barrel to find more video games to play. Give this more time. And that closed the window, so that then took me to my next window, which really is just me uploading videos and scheduling. So, but we'll leave it blurred for no spoiler reasons. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.